extremely easy. So right here, we're just gonna stun him. As you see, the damage 267,000. We didn't really get to spam what we can usually do. Alright, people, so hit level 100. Wanted to go over a little build guide, kind of. Let you know what I thought about while I was getting up to level 100. And kind of the best grind, I think, after all the changes they've done, and kind of what was going on before the changes. So, we started with the group. Had a barbarian friend when we started the campaign, and then as the campaign went on, ended up, you know, it's hardcore mode, so a lot of the people that were with me ended up not making it, or ended up not playing as much, so I just had to go on without. And so it ended up becoming a solo self-found campaign. So you'll see here, you want to save up a bunch of Scrolls of Escape. We have like a whole bunch of Scrolls of Escape, but I don't want to pick them all up when they drop, so a whole bunch of Scrolls of Escape. We have the ability to make pretty much every elixir in the game we want. Most of our mats are maxed out. Things are finished, so it's been pretty good. What I would do is level any way that you want, and that's kind of the best way to explain how you want to do your character in this game. Is when you're first on hardcore, don't worry about trying to do a survival build, like anything that's survivable. Focus more on just damage, stick in World Tier 1, and just do as much content as possible. Let's take a look at the elixirs here. So yeah, we can make like 69 elixir of death evasions. Haven't really gone out and tried to farm any of this stuff. This is just from general leveling all the way up to 100. This gives you pretty much 69 attempts on a boss if you needed. Along with the fact that you seen a second ago, we have so many scrolls of escape. So this allows you to really farm with this build, I think, and you don't have to waste your time trying to go out and get a lot of mats. You don't have to waste your time trying to get a lot of the elixirs of death or anything like that if you get worried about getting one shot. So let's go over some of the stuff. Ended the build here. Didn't really try to hyper farm for any kind of type of uniques. Everything, the attack power, armor, life, everything's just whatever we got as we were leveling up. Ended up with 15,000 life, 5,600 armor, 4,900 attack power. You'll see some people's builds with like 13,000 attack power plus. You don't need that much with this kind of build. It's a little bit different, and sorcerers only get the 2 items to really scale their attack power off of too much, so it's a little bit different from when you see a rogue or a barbarian with like a bunch of attack power. Sorcerers get a lot of their damage from like their intelligence and whatnot and their paragon tree. So let's go over the abilities here. I went with Firewall. And like I said, I leveled up with Ice. We were like Blizzard. Tried out using Ice Shards. Ice Shards was by far one of the strongest. I didn't do too much electricity. During the beta, I used a lot of Chain Lightning. It was really fun. But we kind of go off of the legendaries you get while you're leveling up. So if you're new to the game, you're going to do whatever you can, and you're going to try to get your Altar of Lilith statues. You can try to do the campaign. Just have a fun time with it. If you're coming into this and you're just like, hey, I'm ready to make a hardcore character for the first time, I want to see how it is to get through hardcore, well, this works for that as well. So if you're already into the game, you've been playing for quite a while, and you already have some stuff saved up, you're going to go about it a little bit different than I did. You probably just go straight into being a Firewall build. But the reason why we go Firewall is for the tankiness. So let's go over the build here, then I'll explain a little bit more of that on that. Right here, you can put the 2 points into whatever you want. I went into Arc Lash. The reason why we do Arc Lash is that enchantment effect at the bottom. Whenever you use a cooldown, enemies around you are stunned for 0.7 seconds. That doesn't help much, but what it against general mapping, what this does is it allows you to kind of stun the bosses a little bit quicker with your cooldowns. So that's why we spec into that. If I don't do this, it's usually going to be something like Firebolt or Frostbolt, especially if I'm going to use a basic attack. Down here. If they fix it, I definitely go into Potent Warding, but since element resist doesn't seem to be that great, not to mention, we scale a lot of resist off of our intelligence. We don't really need this as much. So getting the extra mana is pretty good. Devastation's amazing. This is good for a lot of different builds. If you're doing the core skills, especially while leveling up, you will spec an elemental dominance. But since we don't use any core skills at all, nothing in this tree is really good for us other than the extra mana. So we just use this to scale down to the next tree. Down in the next tree, all of the defensive skills are very powerful. We don't use these just because we're in hardcore. A lot of sorcerer builds are built around using these to maintain your mana. And we'll go over that here in just a second as well. So if you just want to know what the build is, let's go over that real quick. We go ahead and go into Flame Shield. We get our Flame Shield movement, and we get the life back when we're missing. We especially like putting at least 1 point in all of these because we're using it as an enchantment. We use it as an enchantment. Once again, that's to help you with your general mapping, general doing any kind of your dailies that you've come up with or anything like that. It just makes it a lot easier without having to worry about getting killed. And because the build relies on you being a little bit more in close range, especially if you want to just control the creatures a lot easier, Flame Shield helps a lot with it. Anyway, we got Teleport here, Ice Armor, and Frost Nova. While you're leveling, I would recommend maxing out Ice Armor in the direction you want to go. The mana regen's really good. But we only really need 1 point into Ice Armor. You don't need multiple points, just 1 point does everything that you need. I don't even need points into it since we have the +3, and I can put this somewhere else. But 1 point's the main thing you're going to need there. Teleport. This becomes really important later game. So while you're leveling, if you don't feel like you need teleport, even though I find it really important, go ahead and take it off your bar. Try out Hydras or something like that. That might help you while you're leveling. But let's go over the rest of the build here. So teleport, we max out teleport, we max out Frost Nova. Reason being is it reduces the cooldown on them. So we don't care about anything other than the cooldown on these two abilities. So we got 9 seconds on this one. We got 4.1 second on this one. These are really good cooldowns. Get them to level 12, and we'll go over the gearing for that. The reason why teleport's so powerful is you're going to use a chest piece that allows you to teleport everything on top of you, and you're going to stun it all. That's going to interact with all of your build and allow you to do a whole bunch of damage with firewalls. Also, after you teleport, you take 30% less damage for 3 seconds. You really only need the 3 seconds once you teleport on a group of creatures. So this damage reduction is almost always going to be up. And not to mention, it's a 3 second. And as you see, you only have 1 second downtime. So you got 30% damage reduction always going. Frost Nova, pretty much every sorcerer, one of the strongest abilities in the game for them. They need it to turn things vulnerable and to freeze stuff in place. So I recommend this for all the builds, but for this build in particular. Down here, while you're leveling, I'd go for Mana Shield. The damage reduction is pretty good, and it procs pretty often with you constantly shooting firewalls out. All sorcerer builds, especially in hardcore, I think you should go with Alignment Elements and Protection. This is just the tankiest. You don't have Fortify on your character, and this is your Fortify. The only way you can really live through things is if you have a barrier shield up when you take incoming damage. Lucky hit chance is just amazing. Your Firewall, as you see, has 43% lucky hit chance. Every point you put into this gives a little bit more, so I really like lucky hit, especially if you're doing the meteors. This is going to make it proc all the time. So down here, when you're first going through here, just get Firewall. You might need a little bit into Inner Flames, into Crippling Flames, but you're just going to get Firewall and then get straight down here into Warmth and to Inferno. So the main part of the build that's going to make you tanky is Warmth and being able to use all of these different cooldowns with the defenses up here. Once you get to Firewall, you definitely want to put as many points as you can into it. And you want to go into Mage's Firewall. This makes the ability really powerful. Every time creatures walk out of the Firewall and back in, they take 3 seconds of damage, and this allows it to stack. So for those 3 seconds, if they walk in and out of like a Firewall 8 times in a row, they'll go from doing like 1,000 damage to them a second to doing like 30,000 damage a second at lower level. So a lot of damage. Crippling Flames works really well. I haven't seen Devouring Blaze work with this build. I don't think it works with the dots. So if it does, this is a very powerful node. If it doesn't, I really wouldn't spec into it unless you see the damage increase. I didn't see any when I was using it. And then as you see, lots of damage increase. Chance to immobilize. This is really powerful. Finally, we get down here. I would, while you're leveling, put 3 points into this. All 3, really powerful. You can take 3 points out of this and go into here, since you don't need the damage right off, but... Warmth, this is what allows you to just regen back to full constantly. In between every single move you use, you put up a barrier. While that barrier is active, you will regen clear back to full, especially if you have a whole bunch of creatures on you. If you have a boss on you, you will have to kite them a little bit and use your barriers to live, but you're going to regen pretty good. Also, while leveling, once again, Deep Freeze, really powerful. You might want to use Deep Freeze until you have the cooldowns to make it so that you can use your build correctly. So, especially a really good rotation would be pop everything off, get all the mana from it, and then use Deep Freeze, get your mana back during Deep Freeze, and then everything will be off cooldown again. You do your rotation again. So, really powerful. Once you're higher level, though, or if you're in groups, group play really loves Inferno. I don't think groups really care too much for Deep Freeze. When you pop Deep Freeze off, everything kind of freezes where it was at. Doesn't really make it to the group, and everybody's kind of like, what's going on? Whereas when you use Inferno, you have no mana cost for your pyromancy skills. Pulls everything to the center, and just you annihilate everything with your firewalls when you use that. And then down here, once again, Shatter for general nightmare dungeons when you're doing that, or if you're generally mapping, just kind of run around the campaign. When you're doing hard content, make sure you want to do Combustion, because creatures are going to stay alive for a lot longer, and this is going to do a lot of damage. But if you're just pulling a pack together, freezing it and walking away, usually they'll just be annihilated by the Shatter, so I just stick with Shatter. Alright, and that's the skill tree. So once again, just kind of Arc Lash. You're only getting skills to get down into your defensive skills. Defensive skills maxed out are Teleport and Frost Nova. These other two are preference, but I do recommend using them, especially for hardcore. These two unstoppable skills are your only way of living through most content. Down in this tree, when you're leveling, go ahead and try out maybe a few of these other skills, but once you're maxed out, Firewall is the only source of damage you're really looking towards. So lucky hit, getting the protection is all that matters, really. Barriers up to preference here. I'm going to have to respec a few things, maybe put 3 points into that. Once again, for masteries, this is your main source of damage. If you decide to go with the potion of 1-up, the potion of elixir of cheat death, or you just don't really care about whether or not the 1-up happens and you're doing content that's pretty easy, go ahead and go for Meteor. The immobilize effect's amazing, and every time they drop down, it just looks cool as hell. Inferno and Warmth, these are the main things here. So there's that whole tree for you guys. As for the enchantments, the only enchantments you're really ever going is Firewall enchantment, so you can get those procs, and Flame Shield enchantment. Once again, Meteor's the other really good enchantment you can go here. You can try out Arc Lash for bossing. It's pretty cool. I didn't notice too much of a difference, but there is a difference there. And then let me show you guys the Paragons real quick. So if anybody's wanting to just kind of go over the Paragons. Paragons have a lot to do, so I'll just show you guys the Paragons here and to kind of talk about what we're doing so that you can understand. And you can copy it, or you can freeze the screen and kind of copy it if you feel like you want to do that, or if you want to do something similar, you can. So go ahead, and Adept is what we put here. The mastery skills having the increased area effect is amazing, and the mastery skill damage, it just scales so high. So when you're first going through the Paragon tree, you're just going to go up here, throw the node in there, and go ahead and go up the tree. Now, the further you get, and once your glyph gets to level 15, it's going to expand itself. Then you'll have access to a lot more nodes for intelligence. And as you see, each point of intelligence adds a lot of mastery damage. So once you've gone down your Paragon tree a bit, and this is level 15, you'll come back in here, and you'll start speccing into all of the intelligence nodes here. Other than that, and that's the reason why you'll see some things, if you're speccing into this, you'll be like, well, I don't really understand why maybe he went over here and did this. It's just for the intelligence nodes, and it's something that you'll do late game. So for early game, just try to kind of get through your Paragon trees, or go for the special nodes that are powerful. Like this resistance node, not very powerful, didn't need it yet. Not very powerful on this one. So like a good thing here would just kind of be going up here, getting your node, try to get the second bonus for it, and then go ahead and go up this way, maybe even. Aside from that, just kind of want to give an explanation how that works. So we go up through here. We're mainly looking for the burning damage reduction, and whatnot from everything. Burning instinct's the big thing we're going for. If you see critical strike damage, big deal. In this build, everything that on your gear that has critical strike damage is significant increase. It says you get 40% of your critical strike damage is added to your burning. Right now, the current bonus is at 337. I just want to show. Like, so 30% critical strike damage. $241. You see how much critical strike damage that adds? We go from 241 to just adding 30. Oops. And we go up to 337. So it's significant. This is one of the best nodes for burning. So we definitely go for this first. In this tree, if you want to, you can go up here right immediately. Reduction from elites is amazing. You can get yourself some extra armor early game. The damage reduction from elites is very powerful. Then if you go up to the top here, get yourself damage reduction from burning enemies. Damage to burning enemies. So this is why I think Burning Instinct's the first board you should use. Other than that, the rest of these boards you can choose in whichever order you want. If you want to go for the crit damage first over here, if you want to go ahead and this board's only for vulnerable damage. I would take this one as one of your last boards. So let's go ahead and go over what we'd do here. So Adept into this one, up into your Burning Instinct tree. You can add any kind of node you want for your glyph socket. We stick with Tactician only because I wanted to scale the burning damage reduction. I think the best node to put in there would be Vulnerable, because it's going to increase your damage the most because of how many dexterity nodes are there. And I've already counted. There's way more dexterity nodes in here. I'm not even mousing over hardly any right now, but yeah, there's more dexterity nodes here in this tree that you're going to be able to get than you can over in this tree. So if you want to scale that vulnerable damage up higher, definitely put it down over here. But I just wanted that burning damage reduction for now. After you get the Burning Instinct tree, pop on over, get the enchantment tree. Doesn't matter where you add it. You can add this on any side. You can drop down over here, add it this way. You can go in through this way. You could add it on the board up here. Just however you want to add the board. Once you get this, just drop in over here. Make sure you get the damage over time taken reduction. Enchantment Master makes it so everything procs far more often. It's very powerful. All these non-physical damage nodes are very good. So, lots of damage here. And then what you use here is kind of up to you. I'm using Reinforced. You can use whatever you want that you can get the stats for. And we'll go over that here in just like 1 second. And then the last node we're using here didn't really go for the Searing Heat. You can if you want. But I just really came in here just so I could grab these damage nodes for fire. Get the damage reduction node. And I was leveling up Pyromaniac and I didn't really know where else to put it. Pyromaniac would even go good in this tree. Just, I'm going to have to try that out a little bit. But what we can go over is this is the tree for the most part. So if you want to take a screenshot and you don't really want to figure out what to do, you can just kind of copy the same thing. It'll work out really well. If you're not sure on what glyphs to level as a sorcerer, or if you're not sure that this is the build you want to end with, you just kind of want to level with it, don't level Adept. Just go ahead and get Adept to 15 max. Don't take it to 21. Just level Exploit, Reinforced, and Tactician. Exploit, Reinforced, and Tactician will be used in almost every single sorcerer build that exists. And they're very easy to use in your trees. You just set them in there. They increase the bonuses of the rares by 120% right now. So very easy to use, very powerful. So just level these up. You'll be good to go. You don't have to worry about what build you're going to go. If you decide to switch out of Adept, you go with like Ice Shards or something. Easy. Anyway, there's the skill tree and the Paragon. That's pretty much the builds in this game. That's about all the complicated stuff. Other than that, it's going to be gearing. So for gearing, as you've seen for like the weapon, I went for vulnerable damage, damage to close enemies, and critical strike damage. If I could get like a perfect one, I'd probably go for like all stats and intelligence instead of the damage to close enemies. Or maybe something like damage to burning enemies. I'm going to stick with this though because it's an 816 rolled weapon. And that's one of the highest we found. And it's got almost a perfect critical, perfect damage to close, and perfect vulnerable. It's hard to find that. So we're going to stick with that weapon for now. The imprint is better for the meteor build than it is for what we're doing right now because critical strike chance doesn't help. But it does help the meteors. The main thing we're doing on this is just the crowd control duration. You can go with a different weapon enchant if you just want raw damage, especially while you're just trying to gain XP. Offhand, went with the Edge Masters. You might want to go with something like increased damage with barrier up, or what was the other one that was looking pretty good? There's a few different ones. This one right here, you deal increased damage while there's a vulnerable while you have vulnerable and a barrier up. So Storm Swell, offensive, that's just great. Anyway, the stats are more what you're kind of looking for here. Legendaries are going to be up to the person that's playing. So damage reduction from enemies that are burning, crowd control duration, and cooldown reduction. That's the only things that matter. The healing received, I wish that was something different. We'll go with what we have for now though. Cooldown reduction and damage reduction from enemies that are burning are the big ones. If you can get crowd control duration, go for it. It's not that important, but the damage reduction, the cooldown for hardcore, just you need it. And it's the reason why we're even using a one-hander is because we're going for this. Alright, so for your rings, legendary, you can go with what you want. I just happened to get this one to drop this way. And I needed to imprint something that was decent. So I just put the increased damage where I had barrier up. With vulnerable fire damage and damage to crowd controlled enemies, you're just going for anything that increases the damage on your rings and max life if you can. This is kind of a better ring. Critical strike damage, damage to close and vulnerable. Critical strike and vulnerable are the big ones here. Along with the neck. So if I could get +3 ranks to defensive and to masteries, I would. But we didn't get that. So what I ended up finding best in slots so far was this 809 neck. It has perfect cooldown reduction, almost perfect damage reduction from enemies that are burning, and +3 defense of all skills. Those were the big things I needed. And the +3 ranks to the Hoarfrost passive, that's just a good bonus. It adds a lot of damage and things are usually frozen anyway. For your boots, try to go maybe for something that's more maybe mana cost reduction or something instead of the movement speed after killing an elite. But when you're getting towards the end of your leveling process, you're just looking for movement speed, so we made these boots for ourselves. We got the movement speed, the Frost Nova, and the ranks to teleport. Those are the big things on the boots. If you can get the +3 rank to teleport, the +3 to Frost Nova, and turn it to +4, and you can get movement speed on your boots, it doesn't even matter what that fourth slot is. Those are the best. As for the pants, 54 intelligence can be switched out, but the other 3 are pretty much best in slot. So if you can get the 20% damage reduction, +4 to Firewall, and then life roll, very powerful on the pants. For your gloves, gloves are up in the air. You can kind of use whatever you want. I went with attack speed to cast flame walls faster, fire damage over time. I wanted lucky hit, resource primary. It works pretty good. I mean, when it procs, you get a lot of primary resource back, and it's noticeable. But it's not needed, and the lucky hit chance on the gloves. For bossing, I do use these. I use when the creature's stunned to do 40 more damage, fire damage over time, attack speed, damage to injured enemies. Now, we do have the lucky hit chance for primary resource again. It is not needed with the build once you get it maxed out. But it's just what rolled, and it's getting to the point where rolling this is pretty expensive. So we're waiting for a better roll, but that's what we're using so far. Raiment of the Infinite. I recommend this to all Sorcerer builds. It's extremely powerful for the Firewall build. So if you're using Firewall, this is where you really start to feel the power, is once you get this chest. Nothing more to say about this chest. If we look it up, it's always the same thing. And then armor enchant on anything. I ended up putting on my helmet. These are the stats you want for a helmet. You can go for something different if you want, instead of the total armor. But total armor is really powerful in this game, so I stuck with it. Max life, cooldown reduction, crowd control duration, and total armor. All of them are almost perfect rolls, other than life. In fact, they are perfect rolls, so that's why we stuck with this helmet in the end. All right. Well, that's all the gear we're wearing. We went over the abilities and all the paragons and everything, so I figured that'd be easy for people. It works pretty well. The reasoning behind doing this build, just so people kind of, well, I don't understand, how come you're only using Firewall or whatnot? It just makes it easy. When you're going through hardcore, especially if you're just trying to get to level 100, it's a lot of time, and if you're going solo self-found, you don't really have time to switch between a lot of things and mess with different builds to try to like maximize for group play. So you're just kind of trying to become tanky, drag everything on yourself and kill things, being able to look away from the screen and not have to worry about your character at every second. And that's what this build did. I rarely ever did need the Flame Shield enchantment, so going with Meteor would be just fine. There's those few moments where Flame Shield enchantment did proc, when I took a tremendous amount of damage. So when you're doing this gameplay, by being Flame Shield enchantment, it may feel sometimes like you're losing a slot on damage, but because you have this and you can play a lot more aggressively, being able to group everything on top of your Raiment of Infinite, and then all the firewalls grouped up and not having to move out of the way constantly, makes the damage go up significantly. So it ends up being a lot more power if you do the Flame Shield enchantment, and you can just sit there and tank things, especially when it procs. Does even more damage to the creatures, and you can just kind of walk away and you still have your character. Pretty big deal. You'll end up having, and once again I'd like to just show, like, if you use that enchantment, because you're never really scared of anything, you'll end up ending the game with so many scrolls of escape. You'll be able to get out of any situation, and you'll be able to make as many of the death elixirs as you need for a different character if you need to. Anyway, I'll show some gameplay of what goes on with this character for you guys, so you can see kind of how the bosses get killed and how we were leveling. And yeah, got to level 100 on hardcore. I highly recommend trying out maybe Firewall. I've seen a lot of barbarian builds and druid builds do pretty well too, so go ahead and try any of those out. The next character I think we're going to level up is going to be either a druid or a rogue for hardcore, so I'll update you guys on that. But this was the first character, so first character ever made on Diablo 4 for the once the game was released, at least, was this character, Crazeblade, and we ended up getting all the way to level 100 with no deaths. And that's the build we used. So you guys have a good day.